of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 2nd Town of Wakefield Planning Board meeting. So, got a full, well, you should sit then, right? Because Dave is not here. Do you mind sitting in as an
No,
alternate?
I'll sit for Dave.
All right. Thank you, Priscilla. So no public hearings, no conceptual reviews. We have one thing, actually, a couple things on the agenda. One is to sign some Mylar, but we can get, is that still
It's good to
needed?
go.
Okay. And so the other thing is to talk about, just from a public standpoint, forming a subcommittee for a short-term rental policy. So we had talked about that last fall when we were discussing what was going to go on, or potentially on the ballot for this past session. And essentially we ran out of time to put together what I would think would be a comprehensive ordinance around short-term rentals. So I'd like to go forward doing that. I'd like to get thoughts from the board about that, and then potentially put a public notice out asking for volunteers to join that committee.
What's the committee for?
The committee is for looking into potentially some, putting together a short-term rental ordinance in our zoning, because we don't have any right now, and for talking about whether or not it makes sense to add some regulations around those.
So, if there's a subcommittee, I'd like to define its goals and objectives.
Okay?
Clearly define
Yep.
them so that
Sure.
we have something to compare them to ensure that they're actually working towards those goals.
Sure, makes
Now,
sense.
When you say that to add an ordinance, we tried to do that and it was voted down.
Correct.
So why would we try again?
So my thought behind it, and this is why I wanted to discuss this, right? My thought behind it was a very close vote. It only had, what it would have done is allowed short-term rentals with no regulations, nothing at all. And what I'm thinking is that if we could put something before the voters that say, okay, short-term rentals, these are some of the things that would regulate, so that it would hopefully be a more harmonious, operation within a neighborhood.
So like an example, it's not.
No,
Just,
no, go ahead.
just saying, so you would put on there to allow short-term rentals at a permitting fee of this.
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
whatever,
sure.
whatever it may
So
be.
we could, I mean, to me, that's possible. I don't know, from someone that might be in a neighborhood where there could be a short-term rental, I'm not sure a permitting fee helps. I'm thinking more of, let's ensure that that the number of occupants have to be based upon the capacity of the septic system. Maybe there's some restrictions on parking. In other words, like any car has to be able to fit onto the lot of that property, that it shouldn't be out along the roads. Again, I'm just talking for.
But see, and I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yep.
But you can't tell people they can't park on the street, because there's no parking sign there, then they can't park there. But if most people, I mean, I'm parking on the street now. See what I'm saying? So I get that thought.
Yep.
My thought is how are we gonna regulate that? How are we gonna enforce that? Because you can't, like, I couldn't go there and determine, okay, there's 15 people there. There might be 15 people there when I get there, but who says they're all staying there? So how do you, that'd be the hard thing. And the other thing that I'd like to say is subcommittee. I feel that that's what this board is, and this is what you've been voted in to do, is to make these hard decisions, right? So I don't know if I'm into a subcommittee, just as a personal opinion.
Okay.
But I like the idea that you wanna understand it and move forward with it. That's fine. But to me, the enforcement of it, it's just something else that I don't know if we got the manpower or the ability to knock on somebody's door and, the right to tell. I get your thought process as in trying to make,
Try to tie it in with the ordinance.
with the, and I get that ordinance, and we have an ordinance now, but
Yeah.
how do you enforce it?
So.
You know,
so-
you can only enforce it if you can prove. We just went through a similar situation trying to enforce an ordinance, okay? We get into the court system, and the ordinance said the town couldn't have enough burden of proof to prove that that ordinance was being violated. It was clearly violated, but it wasn't enough proof. So how do you do that? You've got to have some enforcement. You've got to have you got to be able to, you gotta
Provide
be-
evidence, right.
It's just a lot of work, you know?
So I don't disagree
No, I know.
with the challenge with all of that, right? So here's the, I guess, the issue at this point right now. The zoning is no different than it was around short-term rentals for the past, ever really,
Yeah.
right? They exist in town.
Yeah.
There was a vote out there to ask specifically, do you want to add it to
As a
zoning?
permitted use.
As a permitted use. It got voted down.
Correct.
There could be a strong argument from people this year to say they're not allowed, it was voted down. And there's a lot of short-term rentals that have existed historically in this town. I, for one, think those should be able to continue.
I don't think that's my point. And I don't have, I like the idea that we want to do something or
Sure. Yep.
eliminate. But how do you enforce that something's been happening since people have lived on the lake there? You know what I'm
So-
saying? So
I-
that's my question. It's
Please
like,
don't
how do you
take,
do?
please
No, I
don't
get it.
take this the wrong way.
No, it's all good.
Enforcement's selectmen's responsibility,
Yes, I understand that.
right? So.
That's why I'm
so-
trying to tell
so-
you as a
No,
selectman, how do I enforce that?
So, I mean, so
Because I'm not going out.
I have some ideas, but they're only my opinions, and I just want to leave those alone.
Okay.
But, you know, I guess the way I look at it is, it gives someone in a neighborhood the ability to speak to code enforcement if there's something that is
Wrong.
really an issue that should not be happening, that it's an abuse.
So,
Right.
Bert,
Right.
and I believe there's a few, and I had this thing in my head saying, okay, I agree, I've seen some of these and how much of a burden that they can be to the public, but you got two bad apples in a bushel of a bag, how does
Yeah.
that
So-
affects them all? And I don't know if two apples is enough to do it. I'm not saying I'm for it or
Yeah.
against it, all I'm saying
Yeah.
is, I go back to, as you just said, a selectman's job is to do it. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't know how I would enforce it.
Legally, if the state allows these, they don't
The
allow.
town can,
town
the
can
state
be more
doesn't,
strict.
the state doesn't say without question, you have to
Well, you
allow
can be
these.
stricter than the state law.
Of course,
But
right.
you can't be less lenient.
Yeah.
So if they've
Sorry.
already, I'm sorry,
No, no,
they
go ahead.
passed some housing bills that might actually address short-term rentals.
I haven't seen any that's proposed yet. I'm not suggesting there won't be. Go ahead.
so who's liable in a case like this? The rentor or the rentee?
Liable for what? Damage or?
For having 20 people in there?
The
Violate.
Yeah.
renter, the
It would
one
be
that
the
owns the
renter.
property.
Yeah, the person that owns it.
The person that
Yeah.
owns the property,
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't know who owns the property, who to get in touch with. Maybe you
Well,
need some
the
kind of a
town-
list of who
The town
has.
would know.
So I think we're
It's-
missing the point that we're
Yeah.
at though. Right now,
Yeah,
theoretically, if my neighbor does a short-term rental
Mm-hmm.
that they've been doing for as long as I've been there,
years. Yeah,
I should be able to come to the selectmen and say, that's not allowed by zoning. You have to shut that down.
Yeah,
The point that we tried to do, which didn't pass, I get it, is to put it in as a permitted use and then put some kind of rules around it, okay? It's only gonna get enforced when there's a serious complaint, obviously, because nobody's gonna go around and check which camp has rented it for 2 weeks in August. But if that 2 week in August ends up with 40 people in a 2-bedroom place, which apparently happens, where you get, we used to have one right down the road on 109, the septic system, they rented it all summer long. Septic system overflowed almost every weekend. You'd see one of the pumpers would be there pumping the septic tank. So, if we don't do anything, theoretically, we should not be allowing them anywhere in town, and there's gotta be, what?
Well, I think Tom was suggesting it was under 100, but
Yeah.
those are only through what you would find
Right.
on
Airbnb and
Airbnb.
Those aren't the people that are renting it to, a friend back home for 2
Oh,
weeks.
correct. Yes,
and-
there's that
Right.
exists as well.
And
Correct.
that's the ones I'm familiar with, not
Yeah,
the,
sure.
not the Airbnb ones,
Yeah.
but they're all over the lakes.
Yeah.
So legally, again, we put rules and regulations, the subcommittee meets, they create rules and regulations, because that would be the only point of having the subcommittee. You're not gonna go ahead and go to the voters again and say the same thing and expect a different answer.
No.
But if you set rules and regulations for Airbnbs in town, who's gonna enforce the ones that aren't going to those rules and regulations? And what is the legal bounds that we can actually go to shut it down? You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna end up in court.
that's
Right.
that's the whole thing.
Like,
You're
the
gonna
selectmen are
spend-
gonna
you're gonna
go.
spend money,
they're
because
gonna
we're
say-
not gonna go to them and you're not gonna be able to, because they're gonna tell you the same thing that anybody would tell you on their own land.
So how do
Don't
you-
worry about what I'm doing, you worry about what you're doing.
So it has to be a good sell.
So you gotta be able to
Yeah.
take them to court,
Yeah, so-
and then
well,
it costs money.
And if we're not gonna take them to court, then the rules and regulation things is like,
So,
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the idea of this subcommittee, for lack of a better word, I would say it's more of a public forum than a subcommittee necessarily. But a public forum that has some, not minutes, but notes of, this is what people are saying. The idea was, let's get some people who do the short-term rentals, like Tom, although probably he would have to not be involved in it because he's a selectman, but maybe he could. And some people who came to that meeting, that one meeting that we had, and were upset with what had happened in their neighborhood. Try to come to some kind of common sense bunch of, I wouldn't even call them regulations, more kind of rules of the road. Maybe that's probably too informal, because we put it in zoning, it's gotta be formal, and the lawyers have gotta look at it and all that. I don't see this being something where we're gonna be in court with 15 people every year, and it's gonna cost, I think it involves, somebody makes a complaint, code enforcement goes and talks to the owner, at least finds out who the owner is. A letter goes, hey, this is what happened, we got a complaint, we want you to address that, we'd like to come and meet with you, rather than, we're gonna slap you with a fine, and wow, we're all off to court, day one. It's a means of having a discussion between in the neighborhood that says, hey, this is really not right, we shouldn't have to put up with that. And the owner of the property saying, hey, this is how I end up paying the mortgage. So I gotta do the short-term rental. Coming to some agreement between the two sides of that, as opposed to worrying about whether we're gonna have, 20 pages of rules or regulations, which will not get enforced. This is gonna be common sense, simple set of conditions. If you're gonna do short-term rentals, this is the way you have to do it to make sure your neighbors don't get, don't get aggrieved.
So, I got two things. So it sounds like more community outreach to
That's
educate
what I
the
would-
community. That's what I heard from Dick. The second thing I would caution people on is that, you know, short-term rentals are great. Seasonal rentals are great. But what I'll tell you right now is that there's 5,585 properties that we tax. There's how many voters that showed up to vote? Maybe 12 to 1,500 of them.
I don't even
Tells
know
me
that
there's
much.
800.
maybe 800 showed up to vote. Tells me there should be 10,000 voters in this town. At least 10,000 voters in this town if you have that many residents that you send property tax bills to.
Yeah, but more than half of those are not residents.
Exactly what I'm getting to here. So now you fill up with short-term rentals, right? Seasonal rentals. These people aren't even voting. They don't represent the constituents of this town, right? They don't represent the people of this town. So now your voting number is very slim. You know, so what do you end up with? 500 voters at the end of it, you know, said and done?
800, but.
Yeah,
So-
you know
so
what I mean?
understand- I understand what
There's
what you're
no,
saying.
yes, we
Um,
tax the lakefronts 61%, but that number's gonna be offset shortly, within years, because there's no more land on the lakes, right? So you're not building anything
Yeah,
else
it
out
will-
there.
The percentage will go down, sure.
Exactly, and right now, this is what that is basically coming from. It's coming from the lakefront properties. But a good majority of that's coming from the lakefront properties.
Yeah,
And we wanna
sure.
protect our golden goose, which
Yeah.
we protect our lake,
Yep.
right? And so I just say, it just, you know, it was interesting stats I was looking at, and I was like, geez, that's crazy, because they don't have any say in what goes on, right? They're just getting a tax bill, they pay it, maybe they're living down here, they're paying their mortgage, they live in Mass.
Yep.
This town doesn't reap any benefits from that homeowner. They're not spending money in town. Yes, we say, oh, whoever's
A lot of
renting
benefits
that,
Because they don't ask for anything.
Right.
But you reap benefits from the 40
From the
people that are
property
staying
tax?
in that building, because they're down at
That's
the
you
true.
think
Blue
so?
Bay,
That
they're
is
down,
true.
they're coming
You're
down
assuming.
the level lake thing here, and,
Yep.
yeah, so you benefit. But I agree, I don't disagree with anything, because I feel bad for a lot of the neighbors, because some of these people just don't give a crap. You know,
Right.
they
Right.
just, they're there to party for the week and the noise and whatever, but that's when you call the police.
well, don't you
know?
already have things like occupancy limits, right? Right.
We could, right? That's something that you could do.
Yeah.
But you still can't regulate that. You
good.
don't know if the
I didn't know if
occupancy
we already
is
had one.
20 people, you could have 50 in
For a
there. How do you
septic.
know?
So
doesn't it go by
wait, can
septic?
you say that again, please?
I said you could very easily, you know, have occupancy limits and for, say, 8 people, and you could have 40 people in there. Well, how would you know?
Would it be based
I
on the
mean, it would be
septic?
relatively, if it was in extreme, like
The-
overuse.
The extreme is
it
the
would
only way you're
be-
gonna be able to
it would
handle
be,
this.
Like,
Those are,
pretty
but those are
apparent.
exactly the
Yeah.
places that get people upset, the places that go to an extreme.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it's always those two bad apples.
Yeah.
And I get it,
Those
because
are
I
the
hear
only
about
ones
it, I hear
that-
about it a lot, and I see it, because I'm up in the area where a lot of them are. And I see it, in Beverly Hills is known for them, and a lot of them down there, people do. But there's also way more people that actually take pride, like Tom Daniels and
Yeah, of
them.
course.
They
Agreed.
take
Yeah.
pride on who they gain, so it's hard, and this is gonna be a very hard thing to do, you know, anyway, you know, try to come up with that.
And we don't wanna
I get
be
the
unfair.
subcommittee thing, that's great, because
But
that's how you're looking at it, but I always look at it as, this is what we were voted
Okay,
in for,
so-
to make
so-
these hard
So
decisions.
I understand that, so how, maybe there's a different approach.
I think,
So
well,
maybe
you-
I
it's-
have an
but-
option.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you don't call it a subcommittee,
Mm-hmm.
right? We get rid of that. It's really you're educating the community about the short-term rentals and about the effects of us not putting it in as an ordinance to allow them. And what has to be done in order for, if they're not allowed, what the cost is and everything to actually go out and enforce these Airbnbs, to shut them down and to regulate them, and the kind of regulations that would have to be put in place for an Airbnb if we were to go some kind of route. So it's you're really just educating the community, and then you put it back in front of them to vote maybe next year or something like that, to add that into the
Right.
ordinance. Because Really, it's not a sub, you're not forming any rules, and you don't wanna form any rules and regulations, you just wanna educate the community.
So,
Because
yeah,
it sounds like some people were confused when it came upon that ordinance when they voted. And they weren't sure about it.
I think that's a question. Why did it get voted down? Did it get voted down because people don't want short-term rentals? So if we don't vote for this, then they can't be any short-term rentals. I think some people voted for it because that's the way they understood what it was for. And some people voted, we want to leave it just the way it is, leave the short-term rentals going where they are, but no rules. So I'm totally up in the air about exactly why there were more no votes than yes votes.
Right.
But it was split pretty even, so
Yeah,
that means you
wasn't that
got,
much.
you know, a percentage of the, 50% of the people that walked into the voting booth were in favor of something, and 50% were opposed to something. We don't really know what it
So
was.
that's a good thing, like you just said. Educate.
absolutely.
Educate. So it's just an
Let people
educate.
know the repercussions of not and the repercussions for having, you know?
Yeah,
And to talk about what could be some common sense rules that we could put in a very simple piece of the zoning that says, if you got a problem, this is what you have to abide by. And, whether it's, you can't have more people than you got septic capacity, or, if you've got 2 bedrooms, you can have 8 people, but, you can't have 25 people. And even if people are just there during the day, and maybe they're sleeping in tents or whatever, they're still using the septic system.
yeah, so you could go that route. Maine does that. You can't have an Airbnb unless you have a septic. You know what I mean? Like, people, right now, the way it is, these people could just post it on
piece of
Facebook,
land and.
and they're out there in an outhouse. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
So you could say something like that.
So I think it's
but yeah,
educate, the meetings, if we call them public meeting, we
Yeah,
don't.
like,
So here's another approach.
Okay.
So, for our next meeting, members of the board, if you would like, come to that meeting with some ideas that we can start to talk about what we might want to see as part of a short-term rental ordinance. It's, notice for the public, they would know that we're talking about it. We don't make a decision necessarily that night, we have one more meeting afterwards, and we try to finalize. And
Finalize the approach or
finalize the
Yeah.
approach.
The approach,
Right.
the way we're gonna proceed.
The way we're gonna
not
proceed.
The
Right.
rules and regulations that we
Well,
might wanna.
I don't know, I don't see why in 2 meetings, if we,
You can bring your proposal.
that
Say
we
you
can,
should do that.
we can come up with a draft
Yeah.
that would then be something that when we get to the other zoning changes that we typically go through, that we then bring this up again, and we have those standard
That means you
meetings.
could probably take as many meetings as you
We
need,
could.
because we got plenty of time.
We could, but I don't
till
wanna
next
spend the
March.
whole year on it
No, of
either,
course not.
right?
And you can do it randomly, like get your ideas and then
Well-
look at them, and then you say, well, maybe we don't have much next week, next meeting, maybe we talk about it a little more, you
So
know?
here's where I wanna be fair to the people from the public. We don't offer people to chime in on Zoom anymore, and I get it, and I'm okay with it, right? They can come here, and that's great, but I wanna be able to definitively say to those people, this is when we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah,
So they can
agreed.
come,
Yeah.
and they can, or they can send us a letter, like, they can let, their voice can be heard, and therefore, so what I would propose, if other people are okay with it, when's our next meeting? It's,
The
the
16th.
16th. So if folks that would like to, that are on the board, you don't have to, this is optional, come to the next meeting with some thoughts about potential regulations or guidelines, maybe guidelines is better, around short-term rentals.
I
We
think
can
it's
start.
important that somehow permitted use gets on the books, because
Oh,
it's already
absolutely.
permitted, so
I-
I think
like-
that's something we should strive for.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe having some level of guidelines will help
always need
people feel more,
guidelines.
comfortable about voting for that that allowance.
I think we have to get what's happening out there.
Yeah.
People go to the voting booth, they haven't watched the planning board meetings, they look at that and say, do we want them as a permitted use? No, they don't realize that they're all over the place and they're already
Right.
being permitted.
Yes,
And I believe we need guidelines. That's
Yeah, and
because
it-
people take advantage of everything.
And at the end of the day, you sum it up, you put it on the town webpage, people can download it, because these people, they go there.
yeah, right,
They're
right,
there.
yes, yes.
And then
So-
we can educate.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I
We'll
think
try
so.
that as a-
Yeah, it's a good
I'll do some research, see what other towns are doing.
Yeah, so
I'd be
I
scared
can
to do
certainly,
that.
Back at the
I can
time.
certainly reach out to
Some
Jen as
towns
well.
are low.
She had provided some input last fall. We could make sure that we have that available to us. But yes, like research of what other towns are doing, I think that would be super
Yeah,
helpful.
I got the times up.
Yep, okay, great. Anything else on
That'll be-
on
No,
this?
I think that's
Yeah,
a
I
good
think that
approach.
sounds
Okay.
good.
Let's just get through the rest and we can sign the Mylar after we adjourn, does that make sense? Is there anything on that? I know that you had a few corrections.
Right, yeah.
But everything is,
Well,
okay, well, so,
yeah, I don't think it's a big deal, but we can,
well, so, just so it's all out in the open,
Yeah.
it's still in the meeting, so what are you seeing that maybe hasn't been completely updated?
well, it's been updated, it's just that the sheet issue, like remember.
You want to turn your mics on?
Sorry, that was me.
Sheets 3, 4, and 5, but it got changed to sheet 4, 5, and 6.
Okay,
I don't-
and is that now not referencing the right pages?
In the notice of decision, it never said which sheets.
Okay,
Just like on the first ones that came in,
yep. So what does the wording say now?
it says sheet 4, 5, 6 of 10, this set will be recorded at the registry of deeds.
Okay, so if you look at sheet 4, 5, and 6, is that the correct?
Yes, yeah, I mean, if that's what they want recorded, yeah. It wasn't specified in the notice of decision which ones.
Lance, why don't they record the whole set? Doesn't that make sense? Why would
Is
you
that
break the
typical
set
that
up?
that you
No.
wouldn't record the whole set,
No.
right? It's
No.
too
So
expensive.
Normally-
who decided 4, 5, and 6?
The applicant, I guess.
I,
The people
that
that
maybe
made that,
the
It's
survey.
the
that
surveyor
survey?
put it on there.
oh, did he wanna come in?
I mean, the door's open. If they-
No, it locks at
Oh.
7:30.
Oh, really? We just keep them out? Yeah, sorry.
Depends on who you're letting in.
They picked certain pages
Oh,
out.
you
the
pick up
whole
after
thing.
7:30
Might
out
there.
Take the whole thing, but
Right.
maybe the rest of it is really
You could all think of people we
gibberish.
might know in.
You know, 4, 5, and 6, but I guess what does it matter to us once it gets registered?
Well, right, as long as,
Believe
as
they're
long
not
as like.
coming to this
the
meeting.
important
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
we'll
let 'em
let
in.
'em in.
Yeah. You're not on the agenda, sorry.
So I don't think that it makes a difference.
Okay, so you think that like 4, 5, and 6 are representing what the development is,
Yes.
what the subdivision
Yeah.
is? Okay.
Yeah.
And all the
Alright,
pertinent
so-
notes are on one of those drawings. All the important notes or whatever for the future are on those drawings. What's on the other drawings?
And then the other thing was,
Maybe the drafts. These are finals, that's why they went up in numbers. Hard to tell.
See, this is where I would say, this is a perfect question for Jen. Is this where we should be with leaving it at 6, 7, 5, or whatever,
Yeah, right,
5, 6,
right.
7? Or before you sign it, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Or do you
Yeah.
sign it and ask her later? I don't
Yeah.
know. It's up to you.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we sign it and then it's
It's
good and
good.
they can move forward.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
they move
So
forward, but
those probably represent 4, 5, and 6, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
It-
so the Mylar is what
What
is.
gets recorded.
what Gets recorded.
But those notes are on here.
Yeah, so I say
Okay,
you're all set.
and so maybe, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times it's just one Mylar, this happens to be 3.
Right, yeah.
And they're calling out what, which Mylar is getting recorded, I don't think I have an issue with that. All of the notes are on this one, what, does it say what
As long as
the,
nothing's changed on it.
well, that's a good point, but,
Don't
No,
sneak it in.
I doubt it.
They're identical,
Yeah,
okay.
not identical. It's just a different picture of each section of the subdivision.
Okay.
oh, maybe from a scale perspective, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Sheet 3, for instance, shows the whole subdivision, but it's at such a small scale,
Got it.
We can't show the
it's
individual.
not useful, so then they broke it up.
They probably broke it into 3 pages, so you see all, the whole thing on 3 pages.
Right,
That sounds
5,
right.
yeah,
and 6,
That
that's
makes sense.
5.
As long as there's still the conservation easement.
So they took sheet 3, broke it in 3 pieces, and put it on
Right.
3 different drawings.
That makes sense.
So that does make sense, because you can actually read everything on this where you can't on the other one.
yeah,
That makes sense.
okay.
And then, steep slopes were to be added to the legend.
Yeah.
They are not.
I thought we had found something last time that it was, there was a legend that called, something that called it out, I thought.
Which one are you looking for?
See, it's here, steep slopes, and it's in the open space section, it appears. Oh, it is up there
Yeah,
too.
there's some up there, yeah.
But they've not listed on Mylar, so,
So it's not in the legend on the Mylar, does it show like any, I don't know, cross hatches or anything like that? If not, there was,
They added it to this sheet,
but only that sheet?
but only that sheet. And I remember when I saw what he had done, he had just penciled in, when he was here before us.
Was there one lot that had some steep slopes on it?
yes, there is, according to that, there are steep slopes.
But
Oh.
not just the conservation area? I thought along the roadway
Yes,
there
up-
was something that we, like along here. If that's the case, we need that fixed.
I don't see any steep slopes anywhere else. Oh, wait, right there. There is, yeah, there
Right
is.
there,
Okay,
and
you're
then
right.
right
Okay,
here.
yeah,
And so that, they haven't depicted that,
right.
which they need to.
So it's in the legend, so they
Do you
need to
agree with
just
that?
modify the Mylar. Just add
is it
that to
that
the
you-
Mylar.
So in other words, as
Waters
on,
aren't cheap.
I think at least 2 of the lots, there are small sections of steep slopes. Right now, it's not showing that. It doesn't have it in the legend, and it's not showing it on the lot. And we've asked them to show.
Oh, and you've
right?
asked them
Oh,
to
yeah,
do it.
we've asked, this isn't anything new from today.
Yeah.
They just forgot to put it in the legend on the other 2 drawings, or on the other 3 drawings. Yeah, I think that's important. I don't know how important a little section of steep slope is,
That could be erosion.
10 years from
Be a
now.
problem.
Yeah, it could be.
Have the logic push it. The water can blow it out.
Yeah, everything's out.
Okay. So I guess
Troublemaker.
unfortunately, can you go back to them and say,
Yeah.
These house builders, they don't care.
Yeah.
Everything will float away in a year.
It's
so,
like cut the tree, baby.
Exactly.
Drill, baby.
We can save it.
You don't have to wait until the next meeting if, I don't know what their timetable is, right, but, like,
If you ask them to do it, then I think you're
we
quite
did,
correct.
we did, and what I was just saying to Amber is, I don't know what their timetable is, how quickly they want this done, like, we can come in and sign this, we don't have to wait till the next meeting.
Absolutely. All I gotta do is put it on there.
Yeah, so does that help?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for, being so detailed on that stuff as
And
well.
I did get the, executed
Oh, great,
declaration
okay, yeah,
of the
Yep.
open space.
yeah, great. Okay. All right, let's see, next we have approval of minutes from March 19th.
Just,
So moved.
oh, I just, there's not a check next to my name for attendance.
Okay.
Come on, Priscilla.
Yeah, no. Show logos, yeah, no.
You're right.
That was
Now
it.
there is.
Now there is, well, the ones that I send to Tony will have it.
All right, so we have a motion to approve, anyone second?
I'll second.
With that one correction.
We got one correction.
That's,
All right, so we have a
Josh
motion and a
checked that.
second. Any further discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All right.
All right, next meeting date is the 16th, and would anyone care
I
to
have
make
a
a
quick
motion?
question,
Yeah,
just a quick
sure.
question. I told you guys I would do some AI data center stuff.
Yeah.
And I did.
Okay.
Should I email that out to you guys?
Yeah, that would be great.
And I was also
Something
gonna
we
go
can-
to a training for some of these things as
Okay.
well, so.
Yep, I'd
you guys
appreciate
don't-
that.
I just wanna learn.
Can you
something
do
about
that, though? Can you send it out? Doesn't that constitute
it.
So-
A meeting?
a meeting?
No, as long as I blank
FYI.
copy it.
Oh,
So
okay,
you cannot
alright.
reply to me.
Okay,
Yeah, so,
fine, yeah.
yeah, so I would say,
So there's no
This is
discussion
a-
going
No,
on?
it's
It's
just
an
simply
FYI.
information.
only,
Yeah, Right.
and
Yeah, just
let's,
something to
if
look
we
at.
wanna discuss that, we'll do that in a meeting.
At a meeting.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, great. All right,
Motion to adjourn.
anyone with a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, don't you wanna go home? What, are you retired now?
Just got
Like
here,
You're building a house.
All right, thank you, everyone.
I'm on the retirement stage.